Hi friends, in today's video I'm going to show you how to write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form if that equation is given to you in the form of a table. So I'm going to show you two methods for how to write the equation of the line. Both of these methods are relatively similar. The only difference is how we go about finding the slope of the line. For this first method, let's start with calculating the slope. So we already know how to calculate slope using the slope formula, but just to refresh your memories, we're going to start by choosing two of the ordered pairs that are on this table. So for this example, we have a table that has 5 ordered pairs. So these are all 5 x and y coordinates that if we looked at this line on a graph, they would all be exactly in line. To find the slope from this table, I'm first going to choose two of the ordered pairs that are here. So I'm going to use this point, -1, 5, as my x1 and y1. And I'm going to use this point here, 0, 7, as my x2, y2. And now I'm going to substitute these values into the slope formula to make sure that I don't have any issues with my negative signs. Anytime I substitute a value into the slope formula, I use parentheses. So I'm going to start with my value for y2 minus our value for y1, dividing that by our value for x2 minus our value for x1. So in the numerator, when we do that subtraction, we have 7 minus 5, which leaves us with 2, and the denominator, we have 0 minus -1. But whenever you have double negatives, that's the same as if you were just adding those numbers. So we're really calculating 0 plus 1, which is just 1. So our slope, once we simplify this, we get m equals 2 divided by 1, or 2 over 1, which is just 2. So we know that the slope of this line is 2. Now for our y-intercept, since the y-intercept is on a graph where we see the line crossing the y-axis, that means that any point that we find on the y-axis has an x value of 0. So if we're looking for the y-intercept from a table, we need to look for the x value being 0 on the table so that we can take a look at that y value and we'll know that that's our y-intercept, or our value for b. And in this case, it's 7. So when we put our equation together, we have to write it in slope-intercept form, or y equals mx plus b form. So our equation is y equals our slope, 2, times x, plus our y-intercept, which is positive 7. For the second method, you'll notice we're using the same exact table, but there's one thing that's different about this table. Instead of seeing y up here, we're seeing f of x, or f parentheses x. This is the same as y equals. It's just what's referred to as function notation. But if you ever see this, then the only thing that would be different in your equation is that you're putting f parentheses x instead of putting y. So for this second method, it's just a different way of finding the slope from a table. So we want to find our change in x and our change in y, because slope is the change in y over the change in x. So when we're looking for the change in y and the change in x, what we're really looking for is what's that pattern to get us from one number to the next. Sometimes it's really easy to see. So we know to get from -2 to -1, we have to add 1. To get from -1 to 0, we also have to add 1. And we see that that pattern continues for all of our x values that are on this table. So we know our change in x is positive 1. And now we need to do that same thing for our change in y, or our change in f of x. So how do we get from one number to the next? If you can't recognize the change initially, you can calculate it So how do we get from this first number to the second number? It's the same as if we were to take that second number and subtract the first number. And that also will help us determine our change. So we got positive 2. If we look here, 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 plus 2 gives us 7. 7 plus 2 gives us 9. 9 plus 2 gives us 11. So our change in y, or our change in f of x here, is positive 2. And since slope is the change in y over the change in x, then we just plug those values in. So m equals 2 over 1. And then if we can simplify, we go ahead and simplify. So we get our slope for this table is 2. And then finding the y-intercept, that doesn't change. When x is 0, the y value is our y-intercept. So we can go ahead and put our equation together. Now, if you're given a table that doesn't use y and it uses something else, then you want to make sure in your equation you use the same variables you were given. So for our equation, we're going to write f of x equals, plug in our slope, our independent variable x, plus our y-intercept, which is positive 7.